Hello and welcome to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Rachael is a speaker, inspirational author, and an overcomer. As Rachael is walking through her own journey of grief, she's challenging others to persevere and overcome their own circumstances. Find out more at rachaelflick.com. Here now is your host, Rachael Flick.
Hey friends, welcome back to this week's episode of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. I'm going to bring you some special content today that is really near to my heart and something that I am also living in the mess in the middle of, ongoing in a daily way. And it's surrounding my relationship with my dad and becoming his caregiver with early onset dementia while being the mother of young children in my home and also being on a grief journey. And I just want to say too, I know it's hard to talk about family and family things because we love our families and we don't want to bring shame to them or cause more hardship in relationships. And I just want you to hear that that is not my heart. And I love my family dearly and I'm grateful for them despite their flaws. But I also believe that it's really important to be able to talk through these things. And I know that I'm remotely not alone in what I'm going through and the inner challenges and just kind of the secret rules around silence and what happens at home stays at home. And it's not my desire in any way to quote unquote lift up skirts or shame anyone, but to shed light and to bring healing. And so I'm going to have a conversation today with producer Jess and catch you up on how my dad is doing and just what it looks like to be a caregiver for a parent who was abusive and addicted in my childhood while I was growing up. Hey, Jess, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Hopecast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Rachael. I think that this is going to be a really powerful and insightful episode for anyone who's an adult and in a position now of having to reassess their childhood and how their parents showed up for them during that time. And also for those who are caregivers to a parent. And I think that it's just really going to reach their heart and encourage them in their own journey as well. So thanks for being willing to do this. I want to go ahead and dive in to, more context of where things are at with your dad for those who have been listening for a while or who follow you on social media. I think that we've all been made aware of the fact that he has dementia and he is walking through that process and you are his guardian. You're having to handle matters of decisions on his health and financial things and all these various elements to his own life and his own process. You've kind of been put in a position of authority over him. And for anyone who listened to the last two episodes where Rachael recapped her own health journey, if you haven't listened, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to those because it is going to intertwine a little bit with what we're discussing today. But Rachael, you shared with me offline, and I'd love for you to share with the listeners here today that while you were in the middle of your hospitalization and your surgeries and all this stuff that you've been walking through the last several months, your dad also was needing you to step in and make decisions on his behalf because of where he was at in his health journey. So I'd love for you just to fill listeners in on what that looked like for you in the hospital and kind of a overall recap of where your dad is at right now.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you just for being so honoring and kind in the midst of my story and the complexities of it. So my dad is a complex guy, and the way that he is walking through life right now is no less complex than it ever was, even though it's a very different kind of complexity. So my dad was diagnosed with dementia, I think probably somewhere around 2015. And this was something that he hid. This was a thing of shame for him. And I was not aware of this diagnosis. And he and I had had a level of estrangement for quite a while. We were speaking some at that time, but the communication was strained and difficult. And then my dad has mental illness, and he has been a self-medicating addict for the entirety of my life. And so when Micah passed away, I really withdrew because that relationship had a lot of dysfunction and toxicity in it, even though I had learned a lot about boundaries and how to interact with someone who was actively unhealthy in my sphere of influence. And so then in the year 2021, and I really had very minimal contact with my dad up until between the time of Micah's death and in the summer of 21, I get a call from my aunt that my dad has been admitted to the hospital and that he's experiencing paranoid delusions, he's combative, and he's kind of stuck in this hospital in California where he had been working for 20 years in contract nursing, critical care. My dad is young. He was only like 63 or 64 at this time, and he's 66 now. And so when you think about becoming a caregiver for a parent, you really don't expect that it's going to happen while you still have young children in your home and they themselves aren't even at retirement age. I mean, it's just never something I imagined. And so I had to go through the process of obtaining guardianship for him because he hadn't done any preparations. He's divorced. I am his next of kin as his daughter. And I had to retain attorneys and do the work of petitioning the courts. And it was very extensive, very expensive, complicated. He's in California. I'm in Colorado. My aunt's helping me. She's in Kansas. And just walking through this, and I will say this is a silver lining, is that because of Micah's death, I'm familiar with a lot of legal processes. I have a lot of contacts with attorneys. I was able to start somewhere, whereas, you know, as a 38-year-old woman who usually would not have any access or context for needing to become someone's guardian, I at least had somewhere to start, and I'm really grateful for that. And then we've gone through this journey of my dad with his finances and Medicaid and trying to make sure that he is well cared for at the right facility. And at the place where we had brought him in Kansas, when someone removes themselves from a nursing facility, that term is called an elopement, which just, I think, is a hilarious use of that term. Okay, so that resident has eloped. And my dad actually got out a broken window and ran into the neighborhood, and the neighbors noticed that there was someone running through the neighborhoods who did not seem to have their wits about them. And they called the facility and said, "Are you missing anyone?" And so for us, that was just a sign of a lack of safety and stability, security, that no one even knew that he was gone. And so that led to a hospitalization for him for the senior behavioral unit to get his meds corrected and make sure that he was being cared for as well as possible and take care of anything else that had been going on for him. And then going back into that same facility, we were looking for a different placement for him that would hopefully be a little bit more of an assisted living situation, because the place that he was in felt like a hospital. And as a critical care nurse, he was just perpetually on edge, agitated, being there. And I will say hospitals make me feel that way too. It's hard to rest. It's hard to feel at home in a hospital. And so since when I brought him home from California, he had been on hospice, and I was told he had 3 to 6 months to live. And I'm not sure what kicked his pony into gear, but when he got home to Wichita, he got a renewed drive to live, and he gained back a bunch of weight and became active and, you know, was going out to dinner with the family and just had a renewed lease on life, even though he was still actively experiencing symptoms of frontotemporal dementia. So now that he's made this miraculous recovery of hospice drops him. And then we're looking at, this was not a short-term situation. This is a long-term situation. And what can we do to give him the best quality of life? And so in the midst of this, we were looking for a new facility, working with all of the financial pieces, lots of phone calls, lots of providers. And then I have my colon issue. I go into the hospital for emergency surgery right in the middle of us trying to find him a different facility. And so I have this now forever distinct memory of having to take a call with his social worker while I'm at the hospital. I'm trying to get ready for a shower, which if you've ever tried to take a shower in the hospital, it's like they wrap you all up so that you don't get wet. It's hilarious. So I've got my IVs and they've got them bagged and taped, and they're like, don't let your sutures get wet. And you're like, which part of my body can I use? And it was so funny because my arms, because they were taped down with the IVs, they were like, Pinocchio stick arms. And so I was like, I can wash my knees. I was like doing this dance move, like wash my knees, because that was the only thing that I could access. Okay, so in the middle of this, I just want to paint the picture of how crazy and chaotic this is. My nurse is in there. She's trying to get me ready. Everybody's bringing stuff in. They're changing the bed. It's a great time to get fresh and clean, the whole thing. And I'm on the phone with my dad's social worker making care decisions for him and giving my consent for different things and doing a 15-minute interview on his well-being as I am sitting there quasi-undressed with my Pinocchio arms trying to prep for my own care. And it was just like, is this real life? In what world am I sitting here in my own medical crisis emergency? Can a girl just can I have my own emergency?
Yeah.
Can a girl just get some help here without having to take care of other people? And it really did bring up some things for me in my heart that I needed to deal with. It was I don't even get to have an emergency surgery without someone coming to me and being like, can you fix this for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the fast tracking of where we're at today. And then sometime in July this year, my dad fell and broke his hip. And then because of the dementia and the way that dementia interacts with anesthesia, he came out really combative and struggled, hasn't received any physical therapy because he hasn't allowed anyone to touch him. And he's actually been bedbound for 10 weeks now in the hospital. And while I've been going through everything on my plate and going to the hospital and trying to manage his care and my care, he is in just this place of stasis right now where he is stuck, and we are trying to figure out how to help him and get him to a different facility and out of the hospital.
Wow. Has that been a process for you of learning to let go and have God show up for your dad in the same way that we talked in previous episodes about letting God show up for your kids? Has it been a process of that, of having to unhook yourself from maybe guilt or the burden of, I should be there, I should go visit him, I should help him get along in his healing process and get him started with the physical therapy, but then knowing you can't, you're not able to right now because you have so much on your own plate. So how have you seen God show up for you in this process, and what is he kind of teaching you?
That's a great question and a great tie-in, because it is so similar of God, there is only so much of me. I have your presence in this earthen, jar of my human body, right? My human body. And my human body is weak right now.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I'm Enneagram 8. I've got a lot of energy. I got a lot of strength. I've got a lot of drive. I don't have any of that right now. I'm let's take a nap, everybody. That sounds great. We can do a Marvel superhero movie binge on the couch as our family time and just call it good. And so my body has been exceptionally unavailable. And when my dad eloped back in April, I had a panic attack. When I heard that he was missing and that they'd found him and they were calling an ambulance and that the surgeons needed me to consult for a variety of things for his treatment. I had one of my first panic attacks in a while, and I just felt those things that you're talking about, oh my gosh, I'm not here for him. I'm not able, I can't rush over. I can't be at the hospital. And then as he's continued to have all of these life transitions in the midst of my stuff, I haven't been able to see him or travel or tolerate the physical demand that would be to get to Kansas and to even be in the hospital with him for 2 hours would be a huge ask on my body right now.
Yeah.
And so I have a mentor that I asked one time, like, well, what do you do like when you're juggling so much and you just can't keep it all up in the air? And she's like, you let the balls drop, Rachael. I was like, you can do that? Like, you just drop them? She's like, yeah. And then you go back later and pick them up. And so that is some general life wisdom right there. But it can be really hard when that ball feels like a person, or that person feels like one of the balls. And like, how could you possibly, not like, how could you even consider dropping that? And so it's been a disentangling of me thinking that allowing God to intervene and the social workers to do their job and all the practitioners to care for him while I cannot is dropping the ball, because it's not.
Yeah.
It's releasing control. It's trusting that God has had my dad's story from the very beginning, when I had no idea that he was even diagnosed with dementia, to now when I'm his legal guardian and conservator, and am supposed to be making, his financial, physical choices. I can't tell you how many times I have had to make life-altering decisions for him, including, what level of resuscitation is he with the DNR? I mean, that is a painful thing as a child to wrestle with, for your parent, and to hold their life in your hands in a way that you've never been responsible for before. But I will tell you that I have seen people come through, and there have been times when I just simply couldn't take a phone call, no matter how much I wanted to, or I couldn't be as proactive for him. Like, I feel really strongly as his advocate, in the system, that he not be seen as like a discarded person. And I haven't been able to proactively call and prompt and like, let's get a move on like I wanted to. And so just being like, God, I need you to show up for him in ways that I cannot fathom right now.
Yeah.
And even as he's laying in that bed, I need you to be there, right there with him. I need you to hover over him and let him feel the sense and peace of your spirit, because in the unit that he's in, he only gets 2 visiting hours a day anyway. And so it's hard for the family to get to him, because they're not even after work. It's like 4 to 6, right? And people get off 5:30 and like nobody can even get there. And so it's been pretty complicated. And yet I have seen God coming through. I have seen him giving me capacity in places. The first day that I got home from the hospital most recently, so the 3rd trip this summer, the first thing I did when I got home was take an hour-long call from his doctor. And I think in human strength, for me to have literally gotten home from the hospital 30 minutes prior to this person calling, and to have a coherent conversation where I was, making caregiver decisions for him that were legitimate and not like in some kind of a medication haze, like I do feel like I was able to be present for that call. That's God.
Yeah.
That's God, 100%, for my dad to be able to step in and advocate for him when I am so close to my own weakness.
Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful. So Rachael, you touched on this earlier, that growing up, you didn't have the best relationship with your dad. There was a certain level of abuse and addiction there on his behalf that very much impacted you as a child. So much so that you had said as an adult, there was a point in time when you kind of had to limit contact with him. So as much as you're comfortable sharing, would you explain to listeners what the process has been like for you of learning how to step up and be a caregiver for your parent, the same parent who didn't parent you very well when you were a child?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So I am continuing to get more and more insight as I have pursued the Lord to help me understand what just felt like absolute chaos as a child. The things in our home, they just didn't make sense. Like it was like, A plus zebra equals orange. I mean, you just could not follow the behaviors. And, children are looking for stability. They want boundaries. They want to know, I'm safe. And at a core level, I was never safe because I wasn't safe in my own home. My dad was physically very violent and abusive. And it's maybe a topic for another day, but I'm actually understanding for the first time in my life that a lot of what was happening was spiritual abuse through the physical because of teaching that my parents received from Bill Gothard and the Institute of Basic Life Principles, which really advocated for physical discipline to the point of what he termed breaking the child's spirit. And you just beat the kid until they didn't cry or run away anymore. And that really taught my body in the place of fight, flight, or freeze to freeze and disassociate. Because if I tried to run away or protect myself in any way, I just got beat more. And there was a lot of really confusing religious ideology in my home. And that was twisted around my dad being long cycling bipolar and having all of like the symptoms of cycling mania and depression that was never treated. He had a ton of shame around any idea of mental illness. And even though we often begged him to do something, he refused. And then he was self-medicating with alcohol for as long as I knew him until he went to AA in 2019. And so he would get into violent rages that were triggered with mental illness and fueled by alcohol, and then empowered by this very wretched teaching that was not God, but that was sold as this is what it means to be a father, is that you have an iron fist to pulverize your family with. And that's what authority looks like. And so I just remember a lot of terror, of torment as a kid, just deeply fearful, feeling ashamed of who I was, and definitely connecting with the idea of an orphan spirit, of just being like, it must be me that my dad treats me like this. Like, it must be my fault. It must be that I was made wrong, that there's something innately wrong with me, because A plus zebra equals orange. Like, I could never figure out a way to avoid the abuse.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing I could do or ways that I could behave that would protect me except to not be in our home. And I would, try to be outside of our home any chance that I got. Eventually, my dad left when I was 14, and that was also a spiraling trauma in our home. And I did a lot of caretaking in our family for my younger brother and sister, who are 8 and 10 years younger, and kind of stepped in that older daughter, which is also something that was highly espoused by the IBLP thought process, was that, the older children care for the younger children, and this is what it means for them to have responsibility. And so that was kind of nurtured and encouraged in me, and that sense of over responsibility laid in really thick early on, that I was responsible for everyone. And so, I attribute, now that I'm understanding more and more, many of the decisions that I made to, thumb my nose at God when I went to college, because I had seen it. I had seen the hypocrisy. My family was so involved in the church and, Awana and Christian private school and all of these things. And I had seen the difference of how we presented ourselves on the outside, the shiny, happy people thing, versus the abuse and trauma that was happening in our home. And I'm not saying everyone that we were friends with was the same way, but that those ideologies were very pervasive in our community of friends and church and school. And so when I got out of college, I came to a place where I was realizing that I was essentially a toy poodle on a flexi leash. Like, I so badly wanted my dad to love me. I never stopped wanting his love in my life or his acceptance. But due to the mental illness and the ongoing addiction, was never capable, even though I was a grown adult and there was not physical abuse anymore, the emotional abuse, neglect, confusion, A plus zebra equals orange, was still continuing. Like, I just could not figure it out for the life of me. I was going like, these pieces don't make sense, and I don't know how to make sense of my life. And so I made a lot of choices with people that I dated, and choices that I made, and the way that I conducted myself that make complete sense now, looking back as a traumatized child. But in the time I felt like, yep, this is just more evidence that I am, a bad person, and there's something innately wrong with me, and I should be ashamed of myself. And you can see it in all of these bad things that I have done. And the enemy lured me into places and then beat me with the stick that he lured me with. Just like he does.
Yeah.
And so I came to a place in my healing journey where I was like, I'm not trying to punish my dad. I'm not trying to create any more pain or trauma, but like this toy poodle flexi leash relationship that we have, I can't do it anymore. And I need to do my own healing in such a way that I am not constantly in a state of misery and being undone in relationship and presence with him. And I need a break. And I told him, I was like, I can't be in communication with you. And so we had a period of estrangement where I just really focused on trauma, daddy issues, trauma, just circle all the way around that. And lots of healing prayer, lots of retreats, lots of books read, lots of, a variety of content consumed, working on what were the things that I believed about myself that were untrue because of the abuse, because of the mental illness, because of the spiritual religious abuse and the confusion. And so that's also probably why I didn't pick up on an Alzheimer's or dementia diagnosis in 2015. And even though he was hiding it, and I can look back at the funeral, Micah's funeral, and see some signs of it now that I know what I'm looking for, and that I was so caught up in my own pain and my own trauma and Micah's loss. But I can see it when I look back now. But then 2021 comes, and I am just face to face with, you are the one. Like, my aunt has worked tirelessly on my dad's behalf, and I never want to minimize that, but I'm his next of kin. My parents divorced, over 20 years ago. And, my siblings have very young children and are working on caring for their own families as well. And I'm the one who has the knowledge and the resources to be able to do this. And I also might be the one to hold the pillow over his face. And I just said the inside part out loud. That was my fear, was like, how am I going to do this? And God, is all of this work that you and I have been doing, and maybe that's the blessing and the silver lining of the estrangement, was that I pounded into that healing journey of my relationship with my dad. And I just felt like everywhere I turned, it was a new layer, new facet of the pain and trauma from my dad. And I was like, could there be a healing topic here that does not involve my dad? Get out of my head. You are living rent free here, and I don't want you here, but the Lord just kept bringing it around. And he knew the story. And from the beginning that I would be in this place to be my father's guardian. And if we hadn't been doing that work, I might've been the one, to push the cyanide in the IV, right? Obviously everyone, you're hearing the irony and the sarcasm, right? But as a child who was beaten and abused by this man relentlessly for years, it's kind of hard to fathom being his caretaker. And I could have said no. I mean, the truth is, I could have said no and just left him as a ward of the state and been like, I'm washing my hands of this and I'm not being involved here whatsoever. And so when I went to go get him, and I felt such compassion for him, I was so nervous to walk into that nursing home in California in 2021. And I just was like sick to my stomach with, what is this going to feel like? And there was this little frail man who was down 80 pounds, and you could see every single one of his spine and his ribs. And he looked 85, And my heart broke. My heart of compassion was there for him. And I was like, Jesus, the work that you and I did was real. And you are giving me a supernatural power to stand by this man who deserves nothing from me in the love of Jesus.
Wow. So it's just beautiful to hear how God prepared you ahead of time to be able to step into that moment and show up for your dad. And in a different capacity, obviously, it just reminds me so much of after Judas betrayed Jesus and he's coming to him and Jesus kisses him on the cheek, knowing full well what Judas did and what is about to happen for him. He kisses him on the cheek. And in your own way, in your own story, that was your moment of kissing your dad on the cheek, despite all of the pain that he had caused you earlier in your life.
Yeah.
So I really think that's beautiful that you were able to step up for him and be Jesus to him in his life in that moment of time. And since then, continuing to make decisions on his behalf with his best interest at heart. That's so beautiful. So Rachel, you are very much the perfect example of someone who is in the sandwich generation, and that you are taking care of your own young children and also taking care of a parent. So can you maybe give advice to someone who is in a similar situation as you?
You know, I have to admit that I have done some poor me's, in the midst of this, and sat in my mud puddle and, baked my mud pies, because I was like, how in the world is this happening in the midst of losing my husband, being a solo mom, walking through my own grief? Dad went downhill about 2.5 years after Micah passed, and 2.5 years is fresh when it comes to grief. You're still really grappling with the reality of what it is to have a complete change in identity from wife to widow and mom to solo mom and those kind of issues. And I just definitely asked God some questions about what the heck he was doing, just like, where are you and what do you want from me and what is realistic in this situation? But I really had to live in real time and take things on as they came, and didn't have a lot of time to sit in an existential crisis.
Yeah.
And so I have felt very alone in this journey, and kind of not ostracized, but like that I've been set apart into this pocket segment of the population. And it feels very unrelatable. And someone encouraged me to get into a Facebook group that has about 40,000 members. It's called the Sandwich Generation. And I am so grateful that they led me to that group, because I realized that there are tens and hundreds of thousands of families in the U.S. who are doing exactly what I'm doing. And they are caring for young children who are still underage in their home while caring for a parent or an older relative or something along those lines. And many of them have those people in their house. Like, they're not doing nursing home, assisted living situations. They have that person living in their home, and they are doing the bathing, and they are doing the rolling them over in bed and getting them into a wheelchair and transporting them to doctor's appointments. And I have so much honor, respect, and appreciation for these people who are carrying a very silent burden. That was one of the things that getting into that group showed me was I feel alone. I feel like I'm in this like little tiny segment of the population. But the truth is that these caregivers are just so overwhelmed by the amount of time, energy, money, and resources that are needed to be a caregiver for this person who is not able to care for themselves while still trying to pull off parenting, that they're like alone in their home. They don't even have the capacity to ask for help. And I have a couple friends who are caregivers for children with profound special needs. And it is so isolating. Jess, you've shared a little bit of your story here and there and on social media with that. But to have a child with special needs can make you feel so alone. And when you devote your days in and out to that person, you kind of start to feel like you lose a piece of yourself. And who is that? And so I'm really grateful now that I have the perspective of I'm not alone. I am definitely in a segment. Like I'm like this unicorn anointing. I'm not a huge fan of this, right? Like being a young widow and being a solo mom and then having this colon issue with endometriosis, which only 1% of all colon blockages come from endometriosis. Like, I've had doctors look at me and say, you are my one in a career case. I will never see you again in another patient. And I'm like, dang it, the freaking unicorn. And then I have a parent who's in his early 60s with mental illness and now, an organic brain disease, which isn't uncommon, actually, that I've learned from some of my research, that people with mental illness often get organic brain diseases as they age. So that has been, it's helped me pick myself up out of the pit a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, this is really hard, but you're doing everything one at a time. There are some times where my kids come in and I am dealing with something like my dad's elopement, right? And they're like, Mom, I need to know how to make watermelon soup, or whatever kid thing that they want from me in that moment. And I'm like, no. I'm like, can everybody just please take a number? Oh my gosh.
Right.
I definitely have the please take a number thought pretty often. But, the Lord does give us grace for what we're called to. And I do feel like I'm in a season that is called to care for my dad, and that he does show up for them. He shows up for my kids. And if I have to decline a call, then I have to decline it, and we'll come back around, and someone will take care of my dad in that interim moment where I am physically unable to do that. Someone will show up.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that another mentor taught me, is that when you have too much to reasonably do on your to-do list, then you just do your top 3, and things will either come back around because they are truly urgent, or they will fall off the list and take care of themselves. And there's been a lot of times where I've had to learn that even though it feels like, I'm going to die with a to-do list, Jess. Like,
I feel that.
I will have one when on my deathbed, I will not complete it. And so I don't want to let the to-do list be my master. And I definitely don't want it to be my emotional barometer, right? Like how much I've achieved or accomplished, because there's always so much more to do and never enough of me to do it.
Right.
And just saying, Jesus, I need you. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I have just called on the name of Jesus out loud and seen him come through for me.
Yeah.
In amazing and miraculous ways. And that's really, I think, the reality, the truth of caregiving is living hour to hour and day by day. And, Jess Ronnie from Jess Plus the Mess, she has a son with severe special needs. And I interviewed her on the podcast before, Blended with Grit and Grace. She's got an amazing story, and she has a ministry for families who are caregivers with kids with profound special needs and a lot of resources. So I'm going to encourage people who are doing a lot of caregiving to go and at least start there and join that Sandwich Generation group on Facebook. I'm just learning a lot. And even if I only read other people's posts and just get a sense of empathy that I am not alone, that has been hugely comforting for me. And hopefully it will be for other people too.
Yeah, that's great advice. Gotta love the Facebook groups. I've found myself in those a number of times as well. And like you just said, Rachel, it's a great resource to have, just to know you're not alone. Even if these aren't people that you are actively living life with, you at least know they're out there. And you get to read stories of other people who are facing similar things, and just have this sense of camaraderie right where you're at, no matter what you're going through. So I would agree with you on that. Joining a Facebook group is a great place to start, and getting community and just adding to the awareness that you're not alone, no matter what struggle you're in.
Yeah. And hopefully that's a huge part of what the Hopecast is doing for people, that they can listen to these stories of survivors, of overcomers, of hope peddlers, and say, you know what, I am not alone. Someone else has done this, has lived this before me, and I can survive it too. And Jess, this has been a really powerful conversation, and I appreciate you being willing to wade into some really deep waters with me. I just had my 41st birthday, and I am kind of like, holy cow, like, look at what God has done and where he has brought me in these years. And to be able to share some of that, and to let the story redeem other people's losses and other people's lives, because it won't be for nothing.
It won't be. Absolutely. And I appreciate you allowing me to sit with you in this. And bringing the pieces of your story to the light for listeners to hear, and just the comfort that I know provides them on their own journey. So thank you for sharing so openly and so vulnerably, and just bringing us in a little bit closer to you and your heart and your journey and what you're walking through.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm on holy ground, I'm really in the middle of my mess, and there's a lot of undone. There's no bows. There's basically no bows, people. I'd love a bow. Just send me a bow. Send me a bow emoji on social media. That's all I need. But yeah, this has been a really special, intimate conversation, and I'm grateful that the Lord has given me the confidence of identity to be able to talk about it without feeling the shame that I grew up with around it, and just seeing how the different things impacted the person that I became and who I am now. And it's a special thing to be able to put some of these things out there for others. So friends, thank you so much for joining me and producer Jess on the Hopecast today. This was deep waters, and I'm so glad. I hope you're still swimming. Maybe you need to take some breaks and put your snorkel mask on there, but we did it, and we went there, and I'm grateful to have been able to do that with you. And I hope that this story connects with you and helps you in some places with moving forward into reconciliation with people who don't deserve that from you. And I'm just praying over your relationships right now, that they would be restored in places that seemed dead, that there was no hope in them. And if this episode has touched your heart or reached you in a special way, and you know someone else who would be met and seen by this content, would you share it with them? That helps us press forward the message of hope to more and more people, which is the whole heart of the Hopecast. Would you rate and review the Hopecast, especially on the Apple platform? That really helps get it out. That's where the majority of people are listening, but I'm grateful for you listening anywhere you are. And thank you so much for your time. And it was good to be together on the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.
You've been listening to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. To find out more, go to rachaelflick.com. While you're there, you can book Rachael for your next speaking engagement. Her inspiring message will be sure to engage and touch the heart of your audience at your next conference, church event, or business function. Go to rachaelflick.com to book her today. While you're online, you can discover more information about all of the platforms that this podcast is on. Also, be sure to click on the social media icons at the top of the page, and you will be directed to Rachael's social media sites. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate if you would subscribe and leave us a review. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.